Who depressed us most in SEC Week 2? Was it Mark Stoops, Payton Thorne, Sam Pittman? How about all of them?
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along on today's show. We'll run through who impressed and who depressed us in SEC Week 2. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Go to 5hourenergy.com. That's the number 5. Use our promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. All right, we normally start with our who impressed, but we're going to start with who depressed in our SEC Week 2 of the SEC. We'll get to impressed in the next segment, but let's start with who depressed us. And first and foremost, who depressed in SEC Week 2? Well, how about Kentucky head coach Mark Stoops? What was that, Kentucky? Kentucky did not just lose at home to South Carolina. They were obliterated 31-6. And the Cats, they were at home. SEC Nation was there. Marty and McGee were there. Heavy home favorites on a national stage on ABC. The stage was set, and they were atrocious. Let's start with the putrid offensive line play. They give up 5 sacks on the day. Running back Demi Sumo Karngbe had some success running the football at times, but as a team, the Cats ran for just 3 yards a carry. Not many running lanes. And the quarterback, Brock Vandegrift. He had a nice game Week 1 against Southern Miss. He was putrid this week. 3 for 10 for just 30 yards with an interception. That's not like a quarter. That's for the game. Now, they did put in the transfer Gavin Wimsatt later on in the game. He would go 3 for 7 for 14 yards and an interception. But Vandegrift's QBR was 1 for 2 on the day. The quarterback performance made Kentucky fans long for the days of Lynn Bowden when he was playing quarterback. Look, credit South Carolina's defense. They were playing with their hair on fire. But Kentucky, with just 183 yards on the day, 3 for 14 on third down, 0 for 2 on fourth down, 11 penalties on the day. Mark Stoops said after the game, "We've been beaten by some good teams during my time here, but the teams always kept fighting. We did not get that today. It didn't look like we're a very well-coached team, and the team didn't respond. They beat us in every facet." Now, even before losing left guard Jagger Burton and right tackle Gerald Mincy to injuries, the offensive line struggled to protect Vandegrift, and they just never got the passing game going. The offensive line allowed 11 tackles for a loss. Kentucky went more than 2 quarters without completing a pass on Saturday. Stoops went on to say, "It's ridiculously embarrassing on my part to have that many mistakes in a game." And look, I've even seen some people on social media saying, maybe this program peaked 2 years ago under Stoops. Of course, there were the rumblings this offseason that Texas A&M flirted with him and possibly wanted to hire him. Stoops did just sign that contract extension back in November of 2022, a contract that carries him through June 2031, paying him $9 million a season. And now next up for Kentucky, they host number 1 Georgia. And after that, they get Ohio. And then it's a road trip to Ole Miss. And even a home game versus Vandy on October 12th doesn't appear to be a gimme anymore. They still have to play at Tennessee, at Texas. I mean, this year could really get ugly for Mark Stoops and the Cats if they do not improve dramatically. Next up on our depressed list of Week 2, it is Payton Thorne. Look, we have ripped on Payton Thorne a lot on this show, but he absolutely deserves it for how he played in Week 2. After all the goodwill we gave Auburn in Week 1, where we said, they finally got some weapons. These freshman wide receivers, they got weapons to surround Thorne. Payton Thorne went out and threw not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 interceptions in a home loss to Cal, 21-14. Payton Thorne, he threw a touchdown on the opening drive of the game and then proceeded to turn the ball over on downs, interception, 3 and out, missed field goal. That was the rest of the half. And that first interception led to Cal's go-ahead touchdown in the second quarter. Auburn then opened the second half going punt, interception, lost fumble before they were able to cut the deficit to 7. but Thorne threw a couple interceptions on the last two possessions and an absolutely dreadful day for him. Hugh Freeze said after the game, "This is disappointing. I had hoped we were further along. You can't turn the ball over 5 times and expect to beat anybody." Thorne also continued his passing struggles against power conference foes, which was, running theme of last year. And look, Hugh Freeze, I've said it before, he deserves a lot of criticism for sticking with Thorne as the guy this offseason. I mean, look, they should have at least brought in one quarterback via the transfer portal to at least push Thorne for the starting job. I know you're worried about, what if we lose, Hank Brown or one of these backup quarterbacks? Look, that's the risk. You got to worry about the now. And while you want to worry about keeping those guys and developing down the road, you've got to worry about the now and winning games. And Payton Thorne is just does not appear to be that guy. Thorne said after the game, "It's early in the season. It's only week 2. If we hang our heads here and think the season's over, thankfully, the season's not over. It's really go time, and now is the time to respond." Freshman Cam Coleman, he had 53 yards receiving. Malcolm Simmons had just 1 catch. Rivaldo Fairweather had just 2 catches. Thorne completed 14 of 27 passes on the day. And after the game, tight end Luke Deal said, "That offensive performance definitely will never win you a football game. It's just embarrassing." And now Auburn is 3-7 in their last 10 home games against Power 4 teams. They are 6-14 against Power 4 teams overall since the 2022 season. Now they get presumably a bounce back game this week against New Mexico, but after that it's Arkansas, who looks tough now, then Oklahoma, then road trips at Georgia and at Missouri. Maybe it was just a bad thing, a day, and things will get better. They're going to have to for Auburn. All right, next up on our depressed list, who disappointed us, who depressed us? Sam Pittman. I hate to do this because, look, Arkansas was a road underdog at Okie State, but as this game started playing out, Arkansas was the better team for much of the day. And it felt like, okay, they're going to win this game. They took a 21-7 halftime lead over the Cowboys, and then they just did things to let Okie State back into this one. Jaquindon Jackson loses a fumble. They miss a field goal. Isaiah Satania fumbles a punt return. Just so many things went wrong, and I look back at the head coach and Sam Pittman and say, why was your team not better prepared to put this team away? What was your halftime speech? Now, credit them. They did answer when they trailed 28-21 late. They went and got a touchdown, and then they answered again to kick a game-tying field goal at the end of regulation to send it to overtime. But in overtime, they miss a field goal, and then just some poor play calling in the second overtime that led to the 39-31 loss. This would have been a huge feather in the cap of Sam Pittman, who was already coming into the season on the hot seat. And I get it. You might say, well, they weren't supposed to win this one, but the way it played out, they really should have won this game. They played so good early on, both on offense and defense. Sam Pittman said after the game, we got to hold on to the football. If we do that, in my opinion, this game would have been quite different. There are some positives for the Hawks. Taylon Green threw for over 400 yards, did some nice things. Andrew Armstrong, 10 catches, 164 yards. Welcome back to him. And Jaquindon Jackson, despite the fumble, 24 carries, 124 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, 21 receiving yards. Bobby Petrino and the offense have a lot to build off of. Defensively, Jaheim Singletary had an interception. Xavier Sori, 13 tackles, but a brutal penalty late in this one. Just can't happen. And they get a home game against UAB this week. It's tough to think if you're a Hawks fan, you could have been 3-0 going into that Auburn game on September 21st. But alas, you were 1-1. And Sam Pittman needs to find a way to get at least 5 more wins this season to stay on coaching with the Hogs after this year. All right, our next depressed, let's head on over to Oklahoma. Oklahoma, they survived an ugly game against Houston, beating them 16-12 with a much-needed safety coming late in this one. But what is going on with Oklahoma's offense? Quarterback Jackson Arnold, just 19 for 32, 174 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. Sooners ran the ball for just 78 yards on the day, averaging 2.8 yards a rush. They were 4 for 14 on third down, just 250 yards of offense. They punted on 5 of their first 7 drives. All of those drives resulted in 20 yards or less. 7 points came from a muffed punt. And they went just 1 for 12 on third down last week. You combine that with this week, on the season, Oklahoma's 5 for 26 on third downs. Houston dominated the time of possession. And I know the Sooners are 2-0, but offensive inconsistency, a big problem. They scored just 16 points in this game, It's the lowest point total against an unranked non-conference opponent for the Sooners since a 17-10 win over TCU back in September 2005. Now, look, OU fans got angry with Lincoln Riley. They love the offense, but they hated the defense. Well, now under Brent Venables, it seems to be switched. The defense is awesome, but the offense is lacking. After the game, Brent Venables talking with Cole Kublik. He said, quote, "We deserved to lose." They didn't lose. They found a way to win, but he said, "We did deserve to lose this game." Now, they got another non-con game this week against a scrappy Tulane team that just nearly beat Kansas State. And then it's their SEC opener against Tennessee on the 21st. They will have to score points in that one to win. All right, just a few other depressed of the weekend. How about Alabama's first three quarters against South Florida? The Tide did not give their fans a lot to cheer for throughout that one. They led just 14-6 at halftime, found themselves holding on to just a 14-13 lead heading into the fourth quarter. Give Kalen DeBoer's crew credit for pulling away in the fourth quarter. They scored 28 points to make it look like a lopsided win, 42-16. But make no mistake, the Tide was sloppy through much of this night. Just 5 for 13 on third downs, 3 turnovers from Milroe, Jam Miller, and Kendrick Law, all losing fumbles. The South Florida quarterback, Byron Brown, he ran for over 100 yards on him. And the Tide themselves had just 57 rushing yards through 3 quarters against USF. A lot to correct for Alabama as they get what looks to be a semi-tough road trip at Wisconsin this week. But there was some good. Shout out to the freshman Ryan Williams, another touchdown this week to go with 68 yards receiving. Jam Miller did put up some rushing yards late to get to 140 yards on the night. And shout out to Jihad Campbell, 11 tackles and a half a sack for him. Now, the offensive line, something to watch for Alabama. Elijah Pritchett was held out of the first half because of an injury suffered in week 1. Tyler Booker started at left tackle. Last week, Pritchett held that spot in the absence of Caden Proctor because of his shoulder injury. Proctor has yet to play. They started Wilkin Formby at right tackle, and, man, he struggled with a ton of holding calls. So they're going to have to get that cleaned up. One other depressed of week 1, and it's a semi-disappointment. I just thought Mississippi State had a good chance to go pull off a tough road win at Arizona State. It was a valiant second-half rally for Blake Shapen, and Mississippi State just wasn't enough. They lose at Arizona State. Wish they had played better in the first half. They scored just 3 points in the first half. No run game for State this week. Just 30 net rushing yards. Kevon Lee did score a rushing touchdown. And Blake Shapen threw 2 second-half touchdowns, one to Kevin Coleman, who went over 100 yards receiving, but just wasn't enough. Shout out to Isaac Smith, though. 17 tackles on the night for him, 7 of them solo for the Bulldogs. All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC. Thanks again for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we're going to get to who impressed us in week 1. But first, I want to remind you guys, today's episode is presented to you by our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. We've been telling you guys you need to stock up on 5 Hour Energy shots to stay alert, to watch all your favorite games, or if you want to stay up late to watch those intense overtime games. If you were watching that Mississippi State-Arizona State game, you needed one to stay up late for that one. Take a 5 Hour Energy shot so you can start your day. 5 Hour Energy is the brand. Hardworking people like you have trusted for over 20 years. Keep them alert, give you that energized feeling you need to get through a busy, hectic day. You always know where to find 5 Hour Energy shots, right at the cash register at nearly every convenience, drug, and grocery store nationwide. Stock up on money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of that delicious, energizing 5 Hour Energy. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5, hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy product today, you can use our promo code LOCKEDONCFB. That'll get you 20% off your order. That offer is only valid until September 30th. On one order, cannot be used with other promotions, and the code is not good on subscription orders. But go to 5hourenergy.com today and get started. And, man, you'll be more alert throughout this football season. I roll along here, Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Keep checking us out each and every day. We're here for you 5 days a week talking all things Southeastern Conference football. All right, we did who depressed us. How about who impressed us in SEC Week 2? Well, you got to start with none other than the Texas Longhorns. What a monster road win for the Texas Longhorns, a game they just dominated from start to finish. Quinn Ewers, 246 yards, 3 touchdowns on the day. 10 of 16 on third downs, almost 400 total yards of offense for the Longhorns in a hostile environment up in the Big House. And how about that Texas defense, man? They hold Michigan under 300 yards of total offense, 2 interceptions. Colin Simmons, the freshman, he had a sack. Jahdae Barron recovered a fumble. And that's now road wins for Quinn Ewers in 2 of the toughest environments in college football. Last season at Alabama and this season at Michigan. And Texas becomes the first school to beat Michigan and Alabama on the road in consecutive seasons since Notre Dame did it back in 1980. Michigan had won a Big Ten record 29 consecutive regular season games, 23 straight home games, and a national best 16 games in a row. And that's now over. Texas, in its first season as an SEC school, looking like a national championship contender. Sark saying after the game, this one game isn't going to define our season, but I think it would serve as a pretty good barometer of the type of team that we could be. Next up for Texas, they will host UTSA and then Louisiana Monroe before they host Mississippi State in their SEC opener at the end of the month. Man, that's a nice run there for Texas. A lot of W's coming. How about another impress of the week? Shane Beamer. What a win for Shane Beamer. He spent all last week, we spent all last week talking crap about them barely beating Old Dominion in week 1. And Shane Beamer's crew comes out and responds on the road at a full-strength Kentucky team. They jumped on the board with a touchdown first. They led 10-6 at halftime, but they turned up the heat in that second half. Nick Emanwari with a pick 6. Jalen Kilgore had an interception, 5 sacks on the day. Big Dylan Stewart had a sack to go with his 1.5 in week 1, so that puts him at 2.5 on the season already for the freshman. And all those guys just play their butts off. Debo Williams, TJ Sanders, Tonka Hemingway. Can't say enough about the job defense coordinator Clayton White did in this game. They held Kentucky to just 44 yards passing. The overall yardage allowed was the Gamecocks' lowest since holding Eastern Illinois to 109 back in 2021. And Shane Beamer has now won 3 in a row against Mark Stoops. If you remember back at the 2022 SEC Media Days, Stoops took a shot at Beamer about his dancing in a viral video that the team put out wearing sunglasses. And now that's 3 in a row for Shane Beamer. Offensively, Lenore Sellers, he had 2 touchdown passes, left the game briefly. Robbie Asher came in, but Sellers did come back in. Rocket Sanders, 54 yards rushing and a touchdown. Beamer said after the game, an unbelievable statement by our defense and an unbelievable statement by our entire program. And next up, they host LSU this Saturday with College Game Day coming to town. That should be an electric environment. And man, for all the worry about South Carolina in week 1, now it's looking like they could be a problem in the SEC. Let's see how they respond. All right, another impress of the week, the Tennessee Volunteers, an absolutely dominating win over a top 25 team in NC State for Josh Heupel and the Vols. They win 51-10. Nico Iamaleava combines for 276 yards, 3 touchdowns. Dylan Sampson continues to be the best rusher in the SEC. 20 carries, 132 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. Also had 37 yards receiving. But how about that Vols defense? They hold Chattanooga to 3 points in week 1, and they hold NC State's offense to just 3 points this week. A pick 6 by Nico was their only touchdown of the night, and that was scored by the defense. Tennessee held Grayson McCall to 104 yards passing. It forced 3 turnovers. They held the Wolfpack to 39 yards rushing on 28 carries. Former walk-on safety Will Brooks, he had an 85-yard interception return for a score. It was the 10th longest interception return for a score in school history, and the longest since Daniel Batuli's 97-yarder against Alabama in 2017. The Vols have not allowed an offensive score in 12 quarters of football dating back to last year. Remember, they shut out Iowa in the bowl game. Heupel said after the game, the standard of Tennessee is to be elite on defense. This is the home of Reggie White, Al Wilson, Eric Berry. So Vol defense, we said all offseason, if they can get up to par, they could be a problem for people. And they appear to be. Offensively, the Vols used a lot of 12 personnel. They used a lot of tight ends. And Josh Heupel said after the game, this is the deepest our tight end room has been, and it'll be a part of what we continue to do. Kitzelman and Stays each had a touchdown catch. The Vols went up-tempo on offense, and they are looking like an elite-level team. They'll be a big favorite on Saturday when they host Kent State. Another impress of the weekend. How about over at Ole Miss? Jackson Dart and Henry Parrish. Jackson Dart completed his first 24 passes to set an SEC and school record. Finished 25 of 27 for 377 yards. They beat Middle Tennessee State 52-3. The streak ended when Dart and Trey Harris could not connect with 10 minutes to go in the game. But Dart completed 30 passes in a row over 2 games. That breaks the SEC record of 23 straight completions to start a game, set by Tennessee's T. Martin against South Carolina back in 1998. And the previous Ole Miss record of 19 straight completions was set by Matt Corral against Vanderbilt in 2020. Lane Kiffin said after the game, "I'm proud of Jackson's leadership." They're one of the big leaders on this team. And look, they come off a 76-0 win over Furman in week 1. The Rebels defense has not allowed a touchdown this season. In the backfield, Henry Parrish, he had career highs with 165 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns. He averaged close to 12 yards a carry. A little bit of a scare. Walter Nolan left the game with an apparent foot or ankle injury. He was seen walking on the sideline later in the game. But next up for Ole Miss, they'll be at Wake Forest on Saturday. That's their toughest non-con game. I still want to see Ole Miss play somebody good. I don't know how good they are. They look awesome, offense and defense, but I want to see them be tested by somebody. Maybe Wake Forest can give them a test, but it's just hard to get a gauge. Remember last year, they looked so great. Really, the last 2 years, they come out of the gates so hot, and then they, play a tough opponent. Last year, obviously, it was Alabama and Georgia. They lose those. The year prior, they got a big lead at LSU and then let it slip away. I wish Lane Kiffin would do a little bit of a better job in their non-conference scheduling to see what they are. All right, next up in our impressed, how about DJ Lagway? With Graham Mertz out this past week with a concussion, the Florida Gators turned to their true freshman quarterback, DJ Lagway, the former 5-star, and they defeated Samford 45-7. Now, look, I know it's Samford, but Lagway finishes the night 18 of 25 for 456 yards and 3 touchdowns, and Lagway breaks the school record for passing yards by a freshman, topping Chris Leak's mark of 268 set in 2003 against Kentucky. Lagway completed his first 7 passes of the game. After the game, he said, "My mindset was to take advantage of my opportunity, go out there and compete with some heck of players around me." Trey Wilson had a big day, 6 catches for 131 yards and a score. Elijah Badger had 123 yards receiving. Freshman Aiden Mizell had a 41-yard touchdown catch. And Florida next up, they host Texas A&M in their conference opener. Big decision looms for Billy Napier. Do you stick with the freshman phenom for another week, or do you go back to the veteran Graham Mertz? Napier was asked after the game about it, and he said, "Our intentions are the same. We intend to play him every week. We intended to do that last week as well." So not really an answer there. That'll be very fascinating to follow this week for the Florida Gators. All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Next up, we are going to hit on more impressed of week 2 in the SEC. Stay right there. Well, first up, I want to remind you guys, this episode presented to you by our friends over at Ibata. If you're thinking of taking that dream vacation but dreading the cost, with Ibata, you get cash back on all your purchases, so you can spend more time making memories and less time dreaming about them. Ibata is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. You can earn on hundreds of items, from grocery items to beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibata user earns $256 a year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, whatever. And other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibata, you're in cash back that you can withdraw to your bank account, PayPal, or gift card. You simply add offers in the app, upload your receipt, and voila, the money is yours. You can save on over 2,400 brands, shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy. The list goes on and on. It's time you join the over 50 million users who use Ibata to earn cash back every time they shop. And right now, Ibata is offering our listeners $5 just for trying them by using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. You just go to the App Store or Google Play Store, download the free Ibata app to start earning cash back, and use our promo code LOCKEDONCollege. That's Ibata, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store, and use our code LOCKEDONCollege to get started today. All right, a few more impress from SEC Week 2 here before we call it a show. And let's dive back into it as we head over to Georgia, as we got to see the season debut of Trevor Etienne, the former Gator running back who had 5 rushes for 78 yards, including a 45-yard run. Carson Beck threw for 5 touchdown passes. Number 1 Georgia crushed Tennessee Tech 48-3. Arian Smith, Dylan Bell, Lawson Lucky, Dominic Lovett, and Colby Young all caught touchdown passes in this one. Good job by Mike Bobo to spread the ball around. Tight end Oscar Delp left the game with an ankle injury. He was ruled out for the game. Kirby Smart saying after the game he has a slight ankle sprain. Thought he could have played. In the third quarter, running back, true freshman Nate Frazier, he left the game with an injury. Kirby said afterwards he could have come back in. Said he wasn't sure if it was a shoulder injury for him, but certainly something to keep an eye on there. Georgia did hold out a bunch of players on Saturday. Michael Williams, Jordan Hall, Xavier McLeod. Georgia goes on the road this coming week as they will visit Kentucky. So expect some of those guys to be back in there this week. Another impress of the weekend. How about Vanderbilt, man? The Commodores improved to 2-0 on the season. They beat down Alcorn State 55-0. Vandy had 4 rushing touchdowns on the night, a pick 6, a punt return for a touchdown. Martell Height, by the way, 4 punt returns on the night for 127 yards and a score. Diego Pavia didn't really need to do much. He threw for 83 yards, rushed for 51, and a touchdown. And the video board in Nashville said at one point they ran out of fireworks. I guess they did not expect Vandy to score 7 touchdowns on the night. Vandy next goes to Georgia State, who was 1-1 on the year. If they win that one, sets up a huge game at Mizzou next week. Over at LSU, they had a weird game against Nicholls State that was close in the first half, but the Tigers pulled away in the second half, winning 44-21. Remember, they had a short week. They played that Sunday night game out in Vegas and then had to turn around and play a home game on Saturday. But how about Garrett Nussmeier? A 300-yard passing day for him as he threw 6 touchdown passes. Wide receiver Kyron Lacey finished the night with 3 receiving touchdowns. LSU's still having trouble running the football. That's a concern, but there's no doubt Nussmeier can sling it. He's 3rd in the SEC in passing yards behind Jackson Dart and Talon Green. It was Nussmeier's first career start in Tiger Stadium. His 6 passing touchdowns tied Jaden Daniels, their Heisman Trophy winner from last year, for the second most in a game in LSU history. Joe Burrow, 2019 Heisman winner, holds a single game school record with 7 touchdown passes in a game. So Nussmeier's in pretty good company there. Big blow, though, for LSU as they lost starting defensive tackle Jacobian Guillory suffered a lower right leg injury in the first quarter, did not return. He was seen in a walking boot. Well, we found out yesterday he suffered an Achilles injury in the game, and he is out for the remainder of the season. That is a huge loss for LSU as they were already pretty thin on the interior of that defensive line. Losing Jacobian Guillory for the season, not good for the Tigers. Did mark the home opener for LSU, though, 100 years there in Death Valley. So kind of cool that they've been going that long. Next up for LSU, they travel to South Carolina for their SEC opener on Saturday. College game day is headed to Columbia. So that is a monster stage for LSU and Brian Kelly and for Shane Beamer in South Carolina. We'll see who wins that one. Next up on our impress, how about Mizzou? They dispose of Buffalo 38-0 to improve to 2-0, but that comes after their 51-0 win over Murray State. So their defense still has not allowed a point this season. And Eli Drinkwitz's squad is the first in the nation in yards allowed per game, giving up 127 a game through the first 2 weeks. And it was a game where Luther Burden left the game due to a reported illness. It was wide receiver Theo Weiss stepping in. 13 catches, 149 yards. Eli Drinkwitz saying after the game, Luther Burden had been dealing with an illness all week. He said we didn't feel like it was worth putting him back in the game. Mizzou ran the ball for 255 yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. They have a very interesting game this weekend. They host now top 25 Boston College, who, if you remember, beat Florida State in week 1 when Florida State was ranked 10th. But, this originally looked like an easy stretch for Mizzou. It's actually now a tough stretch. They got BC and Vandy as their next 2 games, and those do not look like pushovers as maybe previously thought. All right, one more impress for you. How about over in College Station, Texas A&M? Mike Elko picks up his first win as the Aggies head coach. They beat McNeese 52-10 on Saturday. The Aggies rushed for 330 yards and 5 rushing touchdowns on the night, led by Le'Veon Moss and Amari Daniels. Each had 2 touchdowns apiece. Connor Wegman threw for just 125 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was good, but some wondering just how good he can be. Next up for the Aggies, a big road test at Florida. And our coaches' polls are out. The USA Today coaches' poll came out on Sunday. We saw 8 teams from the SEC ranked. Georgia coming in at number 1, Ohio State 2, and then Texas 3, Bama 4, Ole Miss 5. Missouri comes in at number 8, Tennessee at number 9. So that's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 SEC teams in the top 9 in the country. And then it's rounded out by Oklahoma at number 13, LSU at number 17. The AP poll was pretty similar. They had Oklahoma at 15, LSU at 16. So not a ton of difference there. In the others receiving vote category, Texas A&M right up there in the AP poll. I saw in that category. Vanderbilt and South Carolina were in the others receiving votes category. Now, one quick note on Ole Miss. They reached the top 5 of the AP poll for the first time in nearly 10 years, ranking as the 5th overall spot in the poll on Sunday. Put the Rebels just ahead of the number 6 Ole Miss Rebels in the AP poll, right behind number 4 Alabama. This marks the first time the Rebels have been ranked in the top 5 of the AP poll since 2015. Back in September 2015, the Rebels came in as one of the best teams in the nation at number 3. And there you have it. That's the latest going on around the conference. It's the latest recap on SEC Week 2, and we got plenty to discuss as this week rolls along. Got trouble at some schools. We got other schools rocking and rolling. So we will discuss it all throughout this week here on Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Now you can go check out Locked On College Football, from NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors. Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting year on the gridiron. Check out Locked On College Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.